Good morning, boys and girls. We are continuing to talk about the difference between fiction and nonfiction, as well as questioning while we are reading our books. Remember that fiction is fake. It is make-believe. The author writes fiction to tell a story for us to enjoy. Fiction has things like characters. We know those are the people in the story, setting, where the story takes place, and usually has problem and solution. Remember that problem is just what goes wrong in the story. The character is normally facing some type of problem, and solution is how that problem is solved. Now, nonfiction is very different from fiction because it is not fake. It is not make-believe. It is true, real information about a person, place, or a thing. Now, as we read today, we are going to continue working on our questioning strategy. So you're going to see me write questions before we read our story, during our reading, and after our reading. If you have a grown-up at home with you, you could either tell your grown-up your questions as we are reading, or if you want to write them down on paper or your dry erase board, you can do that also. This week, we have read 2 stories already. We've read Leaves. Now we know that this is fiction. It was a story about a bear who was experiencing the different seasons. And we also read this book, Leaves, same title as the first one, but this one was not fiction. It was non-fiction. It was true, real information about fall and leaves falling from the trees. Today, we're going to read another story that is about fall, and this is one of my favorites. This is called The Fox and the Falling Leaves. Before we read the story, I am going to look carefully at the cover, think about the title, and jot down a question that I have. So take a look also. The Fox and the Falling Leaves. I see that he has a tree stump here. He's climbing on top of it to try to catch leaves. So I'm going to write down my question, and you can use this opportunity to pause the video, write down a question that you have, or share one of your questions with a grown-up at your house. My first question, boys and girls, is, are the leaves falling from trees? Let me move this just a little bit. The world was changing. Each morning when Fletcher bounded out of the den, everything seemed just a little bit different. The rich green of the forest was turning to a dusty gold, and the soft swishing sound of summer was fading to a crinkly whisper. Fletcher's favorite tree looked dull, dry, and brown. Fletcher was beginning to get worried. "I think my tree is sick," said Fletcher. "What's wrong with it?" his mother asked. "Its leaves are turning brown," said Fletcher. "Don't worry, it's only autumn," she said. Fletcher ran back to his tree and patted the rough bark. "Don't worry, it's only autumn," he said. "You'll be feeling better soon." But the tree didn't get better. Each day, more leaves turned brown. One morning, the wind blew a small brown leaf off of a branch. Fletcher jumped up and caught it very gently in his paw. "Don't worry, tree. I've got your leaf. I'll fix you." Fletcher looked around, picked a piece of grass, and carefully tied the leaf to a branch. Just then, another gust of wind ruffled Fletcher's fur. The little leaf shook itself free and fluttered back to the ground. Fletcher picked it up again and thought very hard. Then he poked the leaf onto a twig and pushed it down firmly. "Now you hold on tight," said Fletcher. "No more flying around." The little leaf gave a tiny rustle in reply. I'm going to pause right here, boys and girls, and I'm going to write down a question I have. So far in our story, Fletcher is sad because the tree is beginning to shed its leaves, and he's trying to figure out a way to make the leaves stay on the tree. So my question is, will Fletcher find a way to get the leaves to stick to the tree? I'm going to write that question down, and you can use this opportunity to write down a question as well. Let's continue our story. The next day, a strong wind was blowing through the forest. Fletcher rushed out of the den and ran all the way to his tree. Lots of branches were bare, and little lost leaves spun everywhere. "Don't worry, tree, I'll catch them for you, I promise." Round and round and round whirled Fletcher after the swirling leaves. "Leaves, wonderful, just what I need for my nest," said the squirrel. "But these belong to the tree," said Fletcher. "Don't take them away." "Oh, the tree doesn't need them anymore," said the squirrel, bounding off. "Help, help, the wind and the squirrel are stealing our leaves," cried Fletcher. "Leaves, terrific, just what I need to keep warm," said a porcupine, rolling around. "But these belong to the tree," said Fletcher, plucking leaves from the porcupine's needles. "Not anymore," snuffled the porcupine, and away he rolled. "Help, help! The wind, the squirrel, and the porcupine are stealing our leaves," cried Fletcher. Suddenly, a flock of friendly birds swooped down from the sky. They picked up the leaves in their beaks and poked them onto the tree's branches. Soon the tree was leafy again, and Fletcher flopped down and smiled. "Thank you, birds, thank you," he gasped as the birds fluttered away. He lay looking up through the leaves at the sky and drifted off to sleep. But the wind continued to blow, and the branches still danced. The leaves shivered and shook themselves and began to wriggle free. They tossed and turned and twitched and twirled and tumbled to the ground. They brushed Fletcher's ears and nose and filled his dreams with a whispering sound. When Fletcher finally woke up, he couldn't believe his eyes. Instead of a roof of dancing leaves, all he could see were bare branches against the sky. "Oh, tree, I am so sorry," gulped Fletcher. "Are your leaves all gone?" But then he saw, high in the branches, one small leaf still holding on. "I won't let the wind steal that one," said Fletcher, and he began to climb. He crawled along to the last leaf and held it firmly onto its branch. All day long the wind blew, the branch bounced, and Fletcher held tight. "I'll stay with you, leaf," he said. "Don't worry." But then, with a sudden whoosh of wind, the branch bounced high. With a plip, the leaf let go and fluttered like a little flag clutched in Fletcher's paw. Fletcher looked sadly at the leaf he had promised to save. He carried it carefully down the tree and back to the den. He made a cozy little bed for it and gently tucked it in, but all night long he could only think of his tree, all on its own. At dawn, Fletcher tiptoed outside. The wind had finally stopped blowing and the air was cold. The moon still hung in the clear sky and pale stars glimmered. As he came to his favorite tree, Fletcher saw a magical sight. The tree was hung with 1,000 icicles, shining silver in the early light. "You are more beautiful than ever," whispered Fletcher. "But are you all right?" A tiny breeze shivered the branches, making a sound like laughter, and in the light of the rising sun, the sparkling branches nodded. Fletcher gave his tree a hug. Then he went back to the den for a nice, warm breakfast. The end. Okay, boys and girls, I'm going to put a new question for my after spot. You can use this time to tell a grown-up a question that you still have, or you can write it down on your paper. Okay, boys and girls, so today I have 3 questions from our Read Aloud. Before we started the story, I asked the question, are the leaves falling from trees? And we found out that yes, the leaves were falling from the trees. The reason that the leaves are falling is because the seasons are changing and it is now fall in the story. During our reading, I asked, will Fletcher find a way to get the leaves to stick to the tree? We found the answer to that question also. Fletcher was not able to keep the leaves on the tree despite the different things that he tried doing. And after, I said, will Fletcher like the tree having ice more than leaves? So will he actually like winter with the tree more than fall? You guys have done a fabulous job this week asking questions and distinguishing between fiction and nonfiction. We know that this story is an example of fiction because it's a story. It is make-believe, and the author wrote it for fun, for us to enjoy. We have characters in our story like Fox that had a speaking part. We had a setting, which was the forest, and we had a problem and a solution.